Hello, and welcome to my first Read Aloud series. Since you know that I'm all about the psychic abilities and stuff, we're going to be reading Human Levitation, A True History and How-To Manual by Preston Dennett. Artwork by Kasara. Introduction. Do humans have the ability of physical levitation? Could people actually fly through the air without mechanical devices of any kind? While mainstream science has failed to provide proof, history says otherwise. Hundreds of credible first-hand accounts of levitation are now on record from many different cultures across the world, starting from ancient history and continuing to the present day. Levitation, when seriously considered, is often thought to be the sole realm of saints, yogis, and mediums. However, today, many modern accounts have surfaced involving housewives, businessmen, farmers, young children, and other seemingly normal people. Levitation episodes have taken place consistently throughout recorded history across the entire world and have been treated differently by each culture. Some explain the accounts as a natural human talent. Other cultures concluded that levitation is caused by spirits. Some explained it was a communication with God. Others as a possession by demons or the devil. The history of the phenomenon itself is also fascinating. Probably the earliest historical reference to levitation comes from Patanjali, an Indian sage and author of the Yoga Sutras, the foundation of yogic practice. Patanjali lived about 2,500 years ago and wrote at the time that levitation is one of the 8 great psychic powers or siddhis that come naturally to the yogi on the pathway towards enlightenment. Early records of levitation were also kept by the Catholic Church. Accounts of levitating saints reach as far back as the 1st century and stretch to the late 1900s, and also throughout the Middle Ages that the Catholic Church keeps records of levitations among people supposedly possessed by the devil or involved in witchcraft. At that time, hagiography, or religious biographies, was the dormant form of literature. Thereby, numerous accounts of levitations were recorded for posterity. John van Bolen, 1596 to 1665, was the founder and first editor of the massive Actum Sanctorum, sorry, an official and comprehensive hagiographic collection on the lives of saints. After his death, the project was continued by a group of Jesuit scholars called the Bollandists. The first volume was published in 1643 and contained multiple accounts of levitating saints. In 1746, Benedictine abbot and religious scholar Augustin Clement published a series of scientific works on various paranormal subjects, including ghosts, life after death, premonitions, and more. One of his works, The Phantom World, contained a section about the levitation of saints and is probably the earliest treatment of the subject. In 1756 to 1759, religious scholar Reverend Alban Butler published his massive multi-volume study of the lives of saints, detailing the biographies of hundreds of saints, many whom were reported levitators. The first in-depth study of an analysis of levitation was made in 1842 by J. von Goerres, an expert on Catholic mysticism. Goerres collected and published a list of 72 cases of levitating saints in his book, De Mystique, The Mystical Life. Within a few years of this phenomenon, the phenomenon of spiritualism spread across the world like wildfire, and prominent scientists, including Sir William Crookes and Charles Richet, began to methodically study accounts of levitations, even conducting controlled laboratory experiments. In January 1875, Crookes compiled and published a list of 40 levitating saints in the Quarterly Journal of Science. Also in 1875, the term levitation first appeared in the Oxford Dictionary, originating from the Latin words levis, meaning light. Other terms used include rapture, elevation, ascension, suspension, transvection, and ecstatic flight. In 1894, French author Dr. A. Imbert Gourbet listed several more accounts in his book, La Stigmatisation, which was probably the most complete study of levitating saints to this date. Then the prominent French physical investigator Lieutenant Colonel Eugene de Rocha published a series of articles, Recueil de documents relatifs à la lévitation du corps humain, a collection of documents relating to the levitation of the human body. In 1897, he organized the articles into La Levitation, which became the seminal book on levitation, including, for the first time, accounts from a variety of cultures. Rocha of Roches was later forced to resign his position as administrator of l'École Polytechnique as a result of his interest in research onto the occult. In 1919, English author F. Fielding Old wrote a comparative analysis of several accounts of levitating saints in his volume titled The Wonders of the Saints. The first truly comprehensive treatment of levitation came in 1928 with Olivier Leroy's landmark book, La Levitation, which followed up Roche's research into listing 200 cases of levitating saints and a few involving yogis and mediums. Leroy's book sold well and effectively popularized the subject, fixing it permanently into the public consciousness. The next study of the subject came in 1947 with Eric J. Dingwall published his book, Some Human Oddities, which contained a few chapters on levitation with a strong focus on the flights of Saint Joseph of Cupertino, a 16th century Italian friar. Then, in 1952, Father Herbert Thurston published The Physical Phenomenon of Mysticism. I think that's right. Presenting 20 additional cases of levitating saints, following up a few articles that he had published more than 30 years previously. In 1966, leading English paranormal researcher Nandor Fodder published an extensive study of the subject in his massive volume Encyclopedia of Psychic Science. By this time, other prominent researchers jumped on the bandwagon, including D. Scott Rogo, Colin Wilson, Lynn Picknett, and others, each of whom conducted significant investigations of levitation accounts. In 1980, Steve Richards published his small book, Levitation, which is one of the first modern treatments of the subject. Richards' book presents several historical and a few current accounts and puts into understandable form some of the yogic methods to achieve levitation. In 1990, authors Rodney Charles and Ann Jordan conducted an extensive survey of world literature and uncovered numerous mythical and historical levitation accounts from various cultures across the world, the results of which are told in their book Lighter Than Air. Finally, in 1998, an anonymous researcher published a short yet informative book titled Invisibility and Levitation, using the pseudonym Commander X. Okay, I think that's wrong. I think I said it wrong, but my own introduction to the subject of levitation began in 1985 after reading a brief paragraph about Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint Joseph of Cupertino. Both were saints born in the 1500s. Both were reportedly seen by multiple witnesses on numerous occasions to levitate during the religious trances. At first, I assumed these were isolated cases. Furthermore, they seemed unbelievable. If levitation were actually true, I thought, then there would be some modern accounts. Obviously, levitation was impossible, I reasoned, because science would have revealed this fact by now. My interest in levitation took flight in 1990, when a good friend revealed that she had experienced a spontaneous levitation event as a child. This is a new twist, I thought. While I had never really taken levitation seriously, I thought that if by some small chance it were possible, then an only highly advanced spiritual being could attain such incredible feat. But there was someone I had known for years telling me that she had actually levitated. I was certain she wasn't lying or misperceiving. The only other logical explanation was that she wasn't flying and that she actually levitated. For the first time, I began to take these accounts seriously. Was levitation truly possible? So I started to doing research. To my surprise, I found there was a little current information on the subject. The number of full-length works on the subject could be counted in one hand, and all proved very difficult to locate. More importantly, none were truly comprehensive. The last major study was conducted nearly 80 years ago. I did find several original accounts scattered throughout books and magazine articles, but these precious rare nuggets came few far and between. First-hand accounts of levitation I discovered were exceedingly hard to find. This was especially true of modern-day accounts, which of course carried the evidential weight. So I began to ask everyone I know, what do you think of levitation? Have you ever flown? Most people looked at me like I was crazy. I quickly realized that people are much more inclined to believe in UFOs, ghosts, ESP, or life after death than levitation. But I kept researching, and persistence paid off. I was eventually able to locate several people who claimed to experience levitation episodes. These were neither Buddhist monks or enlightened masters, but normal people who themselves bewildered by their own experience. It soon became obvious that levitation did not belong only to the realm of the spiritually enlightened. If so many different types of people experience levitation, then it should be possible for anyone to do it. After more than 10 years of investigation and research, I had collected hundreds of accounts of levitation. Now I was faced with the opposite problem: too many accounts. While levitation accounts were rare, they weren't that rare. In fact, after reviewing all the available evidence on the subject, one soon realizes that there is an embarrassingly large amount of evidence supporting the validity of levitation. Embarrassing because levitation should have long ago been accepted by mainstream science. The evidence is, in the truest sense, overwhelming. This book is an attempt to compile a comprehensive history and chronology of levitation events to determine if levitation is real, what is to study the mechanics of how levitation takes place, who experience it, and why, and finally, to present any possible methods to initiate this. I am confident. I can't speak today, guys. I'm sorry. I am confident that this is the largest collection of levitation reports ever assembled and the most complete analysis of the phenomenon. More than 350 cases are presented. They are organized both chronologically and topically. Is levitation real? As you will read it, will certainly seem to be real. Definitely the levitators and the witnesses to the levitators claim that is. At first, I assumed there was little evidence other than anecdotal stories. I later learned that there were far many more witnesses than I first imagined. Furthermore, many of the witnesses are extremely credible. I learned that levitation events have been performed in front of eminent scientists, including Nobel Prize winners, under controlled laboratory conditions. And finally, I was surprised to find cases of levitation that have been repeatedly photographed and even filmed. Obviously, something is happening here. But actual levitation? Scientists and researchers who have taken the time to study the phenomenon have usually come away convinced. A surprisingly large number of researchers have gone on record in support of levitation. Leading modern researcher Steve Richards writes, does a man fly? The evidence is that he probably does. Way back in the 17th century, Zacchaeus, the physician for Pope Innocent X, wrote, "This is possible to admit the suspension of the body in space under the action of an invisible force not being contrary to the laws of nature." Medieval religious scholar Augustine Clement writes, "We have in history several instances of persons full of religion and piety who, in the fervor of their orisons, have been taken up into the air and remain there for some time. We cannot reasonably dispute the truth of these ecstatic trances and levitations of the body, and some saints to a certain distance from the ground, since these circumstances are supported by so many witnesses." Colonel Roches writes, "The phenomenon of rising of the human body, or levitation is to use today's term, appears to be one of the most extraordinary psychic forces that our generation has tried to define. Meanwhile, the reality of it has been demonstrated by a number of impressive testimonies." I keep reading too fast. I think that's why. Oliver Leroy writes, "Following a quasi-general tradition, ancient and uninterrupted, the human body has been capable with certain individuals at certain moments of raising itself up into the air, and sometimes to travel there without visible support, without controllable action from any physical force. Today, we call this phenomenon levitation. Pioneering levitation researcher Father Herbert Truston writes, I have taken note of the names of something over 200 persons alleged to have been physically lifted free from the ground in ecstasy. In about one-third of these cases, there seems to be evidence which, if not conclusive, is to say the least respectable. If only the facts are attested by witnesses, for whose good faith we can answer, seems no possible ground for resisting the conclusion that the most universal and familiar of all the physical laws which govern our material existence in this world has over and over again been suspended by some agency external to the person affected and wholly spiritual in this nature. Mireka Aloud, a leading authority of shamanism, reveals a cross-cultural belief in levitation. Levitation characterizes Siberian shamanism, and it is found elsewhere and can be regarded as a typical feature of shamanic techniques in general. I'm gonna have to stop this here, but let me skip to chapter 33 and tell you the methods. This is gonna be a bit, and I don't know how long I've been recording for. I've been recording for almost half an hour trying to read the freaking introduction. This is gonna take an hour or so, and I don't have much space on here anyways. So some of you might be familiarized with this, okay? So the first one is pranayama. Levitation can be achieved through the practice of pranayama, an ancient Eastern practice involving the control of the breath. It should be only done by a true yoga initiate with a qualified teacher. This can be a rather complicated process, so pay attention. The student is instructed to sit in a full lotus posture and inhale. After inhaling, you hold your breath until it becomes uncomfortable, counting the number of seconds, and then exhale. You are now instructed to time your inhalation to be 1/4 the length of the time you comfortably held your breath. Inhale for this length of time and hold your breath as before. Next time your inhalation to be 1/2 of the time you held your breath. In other words, you breathe with a time ratio of 1, 4, 2. If this sounds as complicated as it is, it is. This is one method of pranayama. According to one source, if you can perform the pranayama for 100 repetitions by inhaling for 16 seconds, holding your breath for 64 seconds, and inhaling for 32 seconds, then you have reached the threshold necessary for levitation. Of course, it will take time to work up to this point. This breathing practice will reportedly bring about a number of physiological changes. First, there's a feeling of lightness. The body will then perspire. This is followed by a trembling of the body, which then starts to hop about like a frog, and then finally rises into the air. This is the true practice of yogic flying. This practice may take years to achieve, and students are again very strongly advised to see a yoga instructor if they want to use this method. Another very important note, pranayama is normally practiced only by students who have already mastered the various yoga asanas and samyamas. Included in these are several steps: good thought, good action, abstinence, meditation, and concentration. Again, this method should only be used by serious students who are already under the guidance of a qualified teacher. Masaharu Naruse is one of the few modern living levitators. In regards to how to levitate, he writes, "It is to use instantaneously prana, or vital energy pre- permeating the universe. One's consciousness place one's consciousness on the destination point for floating. According as the amount of consciousness increases, the external reversal takes place, and the physical self becomes evacuated. Then the physical body gets attracted towards the consciousness, which has already been shifted to the destination. One can thus levitate. Some Indian fakirs. How do you spell that? Hold up. What I meant to say was, how do you pronounce that? Okay, um, so some Indian fakirs seem to use a similar method. As Keller wrote of a first-hand case, the magician laid himself flat upon the earth, face downwards, for a minute or a minute and a half, then arose, and pressing his arms tightly against his sides, stepped forwards and upwards as if upon an aerial stairway, walking up into the air to an altitude of several hundred feet. My informant said he thought this might be done through an occult knowledge of electrical currents, as if these fakirs changed at will the nature of the electrical current within their body, was charged from negative to positive, or vice versa, inhaling an electrical influence from the earth which had the effect of destroying the force of gravity. This idea is echoed by Blavatsky, who writes, the altitude of levitation would be measured by his ability to charge his body with positive energy, electricity. This control, once obtained, alteration of his levity or gravity would be as easy as breathing. Says yoga teacher I.K. Tamini, levitation is a very common phenomenon in pranayama practice and is due to pranic currents flowing in a particular way. Writes Rampa, I know it sounds weird. Levitation is accomplished by a special form of breathing which actually raises the frequency of the body's molecular oscillators so that it's able to induce a form of contragravity. One is expert enough, one can control the height of which he floats. If one is not so expert, well, it is to be that they hope they said goodbye to their friends and relations before practicing it. In the East, the great lamaseries where such things are taught, all practices are first conducted indoors, so that the worst that would befall a novice would that they would hit their head on the ceiling, and often serves them to teach him to study more assiduously. Levitation cannot be done while there are scoffers gasping at one because it demands concentration and a special form of breathing. So what it's saying is that if you want to practice this method, then be sure to do it indoors so that you don't like fly off, so that you don't like go into space. So that the worst that can happen to you is that you thump your head on the ceiling instead of like suffocating. And it also says you cannot do this around a bunch of skeptics because one, they'll gasp, or two, they'll think that it's just something completely fake and they're going to think it's a chair and they're going to try to prove you wrong. And then you'll get distracted and then the whole entire thing will have to have you start all over again and crap. So yeah, that's what it's saying. Now where was I at? Oh, some of the best evidence for the veracity of levitation comes from an ingenious yet simple experiment designed by pioneering paranormal researcher Herb Carrington. I'm just gonna skip through some of this. Okay, let's just skip to Patanjali's methods. Yogic methods to achieve levitation are thousands of years old and have been traced to their point of origin. They were first reported by Patanjali, an Indian yogi who lived 2,500 years ago. Levitation is one of the 8 major siddhis or psychic powers. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras describe how one can achieve numerous of them. Patanjali presents 2 methods to achieve levitation. According to Sutra 111.40, by mastery of the Udana Vayu, the yogi can walk over water, swamps, and thorns without touching them. He can also levitate. Sounds simple enough, but the Yoga Sutras are famous for their seemingly simplicity. What is exactly the Udana Vayu and how does one gain mastery over it? With the throat, the Udana Vayu is one of the 5 vital prana's, or energies. It is associated with the throat chakra. Mastering control of this particular energy is then a matter of sanyama or meditation. Richards recommends visualizing a very thin white line, the thickness of a human hair, extending from the region of your throat to the forepart of your nose, then to the space between your eyebrows, and finally to the top of your head. If you can then visualize this clearly enough, Richard says the first few times you may feel a tingling sensation in the area of the Udana. Later you may feel some pressure as the energy becomes stronger, and later still you will feel a very definite pulsating upward current of energy that manifests most strongly in the upper part of your head. After this, Richards recommends visualizing the energy of the Udana growing stronger and more powerful until it literally lifts you off the ground. In this book, Richard hints that he has found this method to be successful. As he writes, "You will find this an exhilarating meditation to perform, even before you begin to read the objective results." While this sutra seems to be effective, it is Sutra 111.43 that is usually cited to achieve levitation. According to this one, by knowing the relationship between the body and the ether, which is the sky, the yogi transforms his body and mind so that they can become as light as a cotton fiber. He can then levitate in space. Another translation by Samyama on the relationship between the body and the asaka, which is space by the way, and on the lightness of such things as cotton down, the yogi acquires passage through the sky. This particular siddhi is considered to be one of the 8 major siddhis called legima, which is meaning to become as light as cotton. To perform this meditation, simply visualize your body being filled with space. Recognize that your body is made of vibrating molecules which contain more space between them than matter. Remember that physical reality is a hallucination which can easily be manipulated. See, reality is just something to keep you guys down, and that you can't say that it's reality because there's no reality. It's energy, okay? So as you imagine your body becoming pervaded with space, you will feel a gradual feeling of lightness coming over you. This is the lightness of which the sutra speaks. If you feel it, that is your assurance that you are performing the siddhi correctly. If your effort is great, then your result will be great also. And I'm gonna skip one because it's too long. This one's also too long. And this one's also too long. I'm gonna skip to the end. Willpower. Some people have been able to levitate without years of meditation or prayer. So yeah, you don't have to meditate for a long time. So that's a thing. Also, I do believe that you don't need a long time of meditation. You can just practice it and then focus on levitation if you want to. You can get it in a couple of months or so. So yeah, they simply use mind power, or a combination of imagination, desire, will, and intent. As the levitating Bulgarian farmer Drogzenovic said, simply, I get there by willpower. Ermalev said, I am imagining I'm holding her up, reverse thinking. The anonymous lady at the fair said, you can just feel light in here, and tapped her chest. Captain Bartlett reported feeling that he could lighten his weight at will, a talent he was able to demonstrate. Helen Hadsell performed this method for months. She practiced this method for months before she found herself suddenly flying. Easily, each of these people are essentially doing the same thing. They are able to intently focus their mind power to achieve levitation. To try out this method, focus your desire, your willpower, your imagination, and your attention on one goal, levitation. Simply imagine yourself becoming light as air. Imagine your body is filled with space, and your arms and legs are attached to helium balloons. Vividly picture your body being drawn upwards. Use all your willpower to will yourself to levitate. Strongly focus your intent and intention on rising up. Will yourself to fly with intense concentration. To rise in the air. Desire it. Put emotional energy into your act. Know you can do it. You just may be surprised at the results. So, yeah. Not only by reading some of this book did I tell you that levitation isn't only achieved by very experienced yogis or saints or whatever. I actually read to you that you can just do that. Just use your willpower and stuff. And if you really want to, that's what you can do. So, what is the lesson that we learned today? That the human body is more powerful than everyone thinks. And that we can do anything that we put our mind to. Now see, I like levitation and telekinesis. I'm interested in that. So that'd be my thing. The other ones I didn't explain to you were like mediumship, meditation and prayer, and astral projection, but I just didn't want to actually tell you those methods because those were too long of pages, and I just had you sit through like 2 pages full of pranayama and patanjali. So yeah. So anyways, so let's recap what we did. Let's recap what we said. So levitation is real by a few accounts and researchers, and also if you're going to perform pranayama for levitation, be sure to be with an experienced teacher. And if you fail to do that, you might as well do it by yourself. But be aware that if you don't do this inside, you might fly out of the world. But may I mind you, it might take you a while to do this, okay? So don't expect to levitate instantly, because it takes time, practice, and patience, and devotion. So yeah. Also, we also learned that you don't need to be a master of meditation. You don't have to do anything. You just sit down, close your eyes, imagine yourself being light as air, imagine yourself being risen up, imagine yourself already being arisen. Because if you don't imagine yourself already being arisen, and you imagine yourself being or if you don't imagine yourself already in the air, and you just imagine yourself going into the air, it will not work, because you don't think future tense. You need to think about the present. The past and the future is something of your imagination, because there's always the present. So think of you as if you are already levitating, like now, as if, like, think of yourself already levitating. Think of yourself already levitating in general, and maybe perform one of the methods to help you out that I just talked to you about. And then maybe, just maybe, you might be surprised at the results, because I believe like we can like achieve this in like a couple of months or a few weeks if you put a lot of time into it. So, yeah. That's all I have for today. Sorry for this like almost hour long thing, because I messed up on words and I had to like search up how to spell I how to pronounce fakir, and also it's like an hour long now. Oh no, 40 minutes long. So yeah, goodbye.